We're going to go straight into the meeting now, and we got a Mark Hughes, who's one of our members, and Mark's was a senior mechanical engineer. He spent a career in the power industry, first starting in the coal and natural gas fired power plants around the US and the world. Towards the end of the career, he joined Solar Turbines, a gas manufacturer here in San Diego, where he focused on adapting turbines to burn on renewable fuels like landfill and digester gas. In his response to the science behind the climate emergency, he and his wife have had a solar array installed on their house 5 years ago and converted everything in their house to run on electric. That can be expensive, but thank you. They've rounded out their system with electric vehicles. They both have EVs. And yes, as Mark says right here, he's an old dog, but he can learn new tricks. So thank you, Mark. And I know Mark wants me to put up this poll. So we're going to launch a little poll.
So everybody, the thing is, click on the one that you think is right. What percentage of a lithium ion battery is lithium?
By weight or volume?
Let's not get too fancy.
I have a feeling this is a trick question.
By weight or by volume?
Let's go by weight.
Yes.
For people who want to get fancy. Okay, we got a
trick question. He's dispelling myths already.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got a few more people to go. We're up to 40 of 48. Let's everybody weigh in here.
By the way, that's a good question, Mark.
Yeah. I ran across this in my research for this presentation, and I thought it was an interesting little deal. So, okay, there's 5 of you left to vote. Let's go ahead and jump in here and take a shot at this. You know, we don't have a stuffed animal to give away. I'm really sorry, but that was in the plan, but there wasn't funds for it. So we were actually going to give away an Oscar award or a real thing, but you know, again, we just didn't have the money.
All right,
But,
I'm just going to end it. Let's.
Okay.
All right.
Survey says.
The answer is that, or the survey came back. Now, I don't know, can people, oh, we can share the results, right, Keith? I'm going to share the results. So here's what we have. 44% of you says it's less than 5%. 33 says it's 10 to 20, and so on. You can see here. Okay, everybody remember that? I'm going to start my presentation now. Okay, so before I get to that though, you're probably familiar with the aphorism, in war, the first casualty is the truth. And maybe war is a term a little too strong to describe the eternal struggle between those of us who want to advance and improve man's lot and those who want to keep things as they are. As EV enthusiasts, we are perhaps like the famous Light Brigade. We're doomed by our embrace of this electric technology to suffer the cannon fire from the entrenched and the invested. At any rate, there's a lot of misinformation flying around out there, some of it doubtlessly delaying the uptake of EV technology. My goal in this presentation to, in the time-honored tradition of David Letterman, examine 10 of these self-serving myths and legends with an eye to giving you the ammunition needed to address and correct people that you run into. Before we dive into the answer to our question, though, let me move forward. Oh, come on now. So, percent lithium in a lithium ion battery. Believe it or not, it is 1%. That's pretty bizarre. I mean, that's like saying, let's call this planet San Diego. I mean, why don't we call this battery an aluminum battery based on what we're seeing here? Next, not all lithium ion batteries are created equal. Lithium ion is kind of like the term milk these days. Used to be, we all remember, there was a small section of the grocery store devoted to milk, and it was one thing. Now, you could have an entire store filled with all the various liquids that are called milk. Here then are the various members of the lithium ion battery family. These are what are called radar charts. And so what we're showing here is energy cost, energy density, specific energy, power cost, cycle life, fast ability to charge fast, safety, and temperature range. By varying the chemicals in here, you can dramatically vary how a lithium ion battery works. So when someone says your EV battery won't last any longer than their cell phone battery, tell them it's like German food versus Thai. It's all in the recipe. Now, as I said at the beginning, we're going to examine some falsehoods that are being spread out there, but many of them contain a kernel of truth. For example, EVs do get into accidents and they can end up looking like this. The problem arises when somebody embellishes the story. I got to tell you, this isn't true, okay? At least it isn't true in our Tesla. People love to point out how expensive batteries are, as if engines and transmissions and their maintenance aren't. But batteries are only expensive if you must replace them. Yes, that has happened to some EVs in the early days. I'm looking at you, Nissan. And of course, we just heard about issues with the Bolt battery. And by the way, I had a Chevrolet Bolt, and I did take it to the recall and all that stuff. And now actually I sold it to somebody else, so they have the issue. But the fact remains that life and technology move on. Given the distance most people drive in a year, the battery in modern EVs will last them 30 years. Picking change up off the street over that period of time, yeah, that'll get you a new battery right there. Here's the next one. But in daily around town use, how much time do you spend at a charging station waiting for the battery to fill up? If you're able to plug in at home, the answer is almost certainly zero. You don't waste any time standing around waiting for the battery to charge. As for highway charging, and long distance highway charging is only a small percentage of most people's annual driving, DC fast chargers like Electrify America and Tesla fill the battery at a rate that varies from 200 to 500 miles of range per hour. The nice part is that while your car is charging, you can get a walk-in, have lunch, get a coffee, etc., and not have to stand there breathing in gasoline fumes. The last point about charging a battery versus filling a tank is that most EVs have a range of more than 200 miles now, making the average daily drive a small percentage of the battery's capacity. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have heard this complaint. It's confidently spoken, by someone who's never driven an EV, much less gone on a long trip in one. Those of us who've made long trips, though, know it's not possible to convince a denier in any way except to go on a trip with them. I suggest you kidnap them and transport them across state lines. Oh, by the way, this is not being recorded, right? Or you could point out that Tesla has installed more than 20,000 DC fast charging stations around the world, 1,100, as shown here, in North America. Electrify America is working to match that for other EVs and has currently installed 600 with 130 more stations coming soon. Thank you, VW. Now, this one is a big one, and you're going to find all kinds of conflicting information out there. The deniers, the ones who like a static world, state this objection as though the world is not an ever-changing place and that no one has put any thought into this issue, meaning we will never recycle batteries. Note that their worry about the perceived lack of battery recycling means they also don't use cell phones and laptop computers. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, they do. Their concern only applies to EVs for whatever reason. But here's some information to give them. Recycling International reports that some 97,000 tons of lithium-ion batteries were recycled in 2018, and over 1 gigawatt hours worth are currently serving in second life applications, which means a battery is taken out of a computer or a cell phone or a car, and it's turned into another use, serving as a battery, doesn't have its full capacity, but it still works. The point is that 97,000 tons of batteries that were recycled was about 50% of the volume that reached end of life. Tesla's former chief technology officer says, Tesla will absolutely recycle, and we do recycle all of our spent cells, modules, and battery packs. So the discussion about this waste ending up in landfills is not correct. We would not do that. These are valuable materials. Here's another point. The lead acid batteries used in internal combustion cars and in many EVs have a recycling rate of 99.3%. They're the most recycled consumer product in the US and have been for many years. In addition, there's a lot of players in this global lithium-ion battery recycling market. Companies by the name of Umicore, GEM, Brupp Recycling, Sung Il High Tech, Tizen Recycling, Batrec, Retrieve Technologies, TESAM, Duesenfeld, 4R Energy Corporation, Onto Technology, and more. Now, this one's a little bit like myth number 10 that I mentioned earlier. The factoids people cherish tend to lag reality, sometimes for a long time. For example, Rolls-Royce is the best car in the world. The truth is that battery cost per kilowatt hour over the past 10 years has dropped almost 90%. It's still dropping at the rate of about 14% per year. This cost reduction has made it economically feasible to put ever larger batteries in cars and thus increase range dramatically. This year, EVs are expected to achieve price parity with internal combustion engine cars. And then they're going to pass them by. Now, it is true that EVs and internal combustion cars burn in quite different ways. The good news is that EV batteries take much longer to get going, thus giving the driver and any passengers time to get out of the car. Batteries do burn for a long time. They are hard to put out, and firefighters need special training to deal with them. But the real question is, how often do batteries catch on fire? So you may have heard China recently ordered more EV safety checks. That was after about 40 EV fires in 2018. But this was across a fleet of 1.2 million EVs in 2018 in China. So that means one fire for every 30,000 vehicles. In the US, according to a report by FEMA that covered the period from 2014 to 2016, there were an average of 171,500 highway vehicle fires. At that time, there were about 269 million cars in the US, meaning that one in every 1,569 fossil fuel cars caught on fire. That's nearly 20 times as many as in the Chinese data. Okay, so here's another data point. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration reports roughly 56 internal combustion engine fires for every billion miles traveled. In 2018, Tesla reported that their rate was about 5 fires per billion miles traveled, or a factor of 10 fewer per billion miles. Finally, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety found that the rates of injury claims related to drivers and passengers of electric vehicles were over 40% lower compared to their internal combustion powered counterparts from a period of 2011 to 2019. Okay, so people may say, hey, battery manufacturing is producing greenhouse gases. That is true. A 2017 study by the IVL, Swedish Environmental Research Institute, found that battery manufacturing produced about 150 to 200 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour of battery capacity. However, they updated that study in 2019 and found that the carbon emissions had, in that 2 years, were half as much. Okay, so they had come down by 50%. The reason is the battery factories they had evaluated had been scaled up and were running now at full capacity, which made them more efficient. They also found that many of these factories were using renewable electricity for production. So as battery production ramps up, the energy used increasingly comes from these renewable sources, and emissions will continue to decrease. As the IVL notes, this dynamic also applies to other stages of the EV life cycle. For example, more and more public charging networks are sourcing their power from renewable sources, wind and solar. Now, you may not have heard this objection before. Perhaps the opposition isn't funding it as well, but it's out there. And it's a hilarious misuse of perspective. Now, this sounds bad, right? 1,000 gallons of water to produce a 64 kilowatt hour battery pack. Well, let's look at what else requires 1,000 gallons of water. And by the way, that 64 kilowatt hour battery pack is probably going to outlast the beef, the coffee, the avocados, and that half a pair of blue jeans. This is a big one, of course. In Nevada, there's a mine called Silver Peak. It's the only US mine currently producing lithium and at a rate of about 5,000 tons per year. That's less than 2% of the world's annual supply. A new mine proposed in Nevada could produce 66,000 tons per year, and that would help protect the US from, say, lithium embargoes from lithium producing companies that would damage our electric vehicle industry. However, that mine might use up to more than 3,000 gallons of water a minute, and it's in a desert. It might result in a water table drop as much as 12 feet, and people in the general area are a little concerned, so stay tuned on that. Next, the Salton Sea, our neighbor to the east, is another place where developers propose to extract the lithium, but while using much more environmentally friendly processes. The processes they expect to use have not been proven at scale, and the first pilot plant is expected to go into operation about a year from now. But that's not all. There are other mines and extraction sites proposed around the country, and given the state of things, the auto manufacturers are doing what they can to ensure that lithium mining doesn't result in disastrous environmental problems. The reality is we're faced with choices. Continue to use oil with all the damage that solution entails, or switch to EVs, which come with their own drawbacks. Fact is, nothing is simple, nothing is free. Now, this one has a core of truth. Children are actively participating in the cobalt mining process in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the primary source of cobalt in the world. But Apple, Tesla, LG, and others are looking for ways to source their cobalt humanely. In addition, it's estimated that we only have about 60 years of cobalt left in the earth. So we are going to move away from it one way or another. And if anybody saw Tesla's Battery Day event, you saw that they are reducing the amount of cobalt in their batteries, and they're trying to eliminate it entirely. In the end, as you've seen, the battery situation is complicated. But name me one part of life that isn't. The thing is, we know that what we've done in the past has serious drawbacks, and that this new path isn't entirely free of briars and bear traps. We don't have answers to all of our problems, but we never stop looking. In short, some of us are responding to this ever-changing world as best we can, and we're dragging everyone else along. That is my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen, and we can go to questions and the possibility, but only that, of answers.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I would say if you guys would like to raise your hand or we can call upon anyone with any questions.
Yeah, Keith, I'm not sure how to raise my hand.
Okay, go for it, John.
Yeah, I was going to just ask a question. Hey, so Mark, first of all, great job going through shredding those myths. Thank you for doing that. I'm just wondering, as more and more auto manufacturers come on board and at least say that they are going electric, and there's going to be more and more electric vehicles on the road in the coming years, do you expect this disinformation to just subside little by little as we move into the middle part of this decade, with the changes we expect in the coming years?
Yeah. Like I said at the very beginning, the first casualty is the truth. But the good news is that the truth is in a hospital and it's on a ventilator, but it appears to be doing very well. So I think we're going to eventually come around. But I mean, if you look at the nature of the big lies in the world, and I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. Oh, yes, I can, but I'm not going to say. They do tend to have a life of their own. But I think from what I've been seeing, I think electric vehicles are really starting to take off. I think the manufacturers absolutely believe that people are going to go this way. I think they recognize that they're going to be cheaper if they were to, in other words, the worst bet that the auto manufacturers could make right now is to stay with the internal combustion engine. That's the best route to the graveyard if you're a manufacturer, I think.
All right, we have a question from Carol, if you would like to go.
Yeah, Mark, last month, I had been seeing an ad and was trying to figure out where it came from. And I finally saw it's the Western oil producers that was running here locally. And basically, it's a scare tactic for renters, for people who don't have EVs, that the boogeyman of California is forcing more electric cars, and it's going to cost everybody else money, even if they don't have an EV. What I think that's probably the number one issue for a lot of people is they are concerned that they're going to have to pay and they're going to suffer a loss of electricity because we're putting such a drain on the power grid and things like that. So what is being done to help educate people who may not want an EV but are truly concerned that it's going to impact their access when we do have power outages and such, certainly here in California?
Well, the one thing that I know a little bit about, a friend of mine is very involved with the process that the CPUC is currently going through right now to estimate how much capacity they're going to need on the grid. And they are watching the uptake of electric vehicles here in California. Now, one of the mitigating factors is that if you have the ability to plug in at home, when do you charge? Usually it's at night. And that's when the demand on our electrical grid is the lowest. So therefore, if everyone was doing that, we wouldn't need to add any capacity at all, because the electric vehicles are not going to drive demand up to the point that power is required during the middle of the day. Now, everybody doesn't do that, but all of that is being watched pretty closely. And there are plans to add some capacity to the California grid. And of course, we want that to be renewable. But it's an invisible process to almost everybody. I happen to have a tiny little peephole that I get to see a little bit of it. So I hope that's a little bit reassuring, Carol.
I've gotten a Leaf. I'm very happy with it. I think the ad itself is total BS. But I am sure there are people who are concerned. And I feel like it's something that we as a whole need to be assertive. I don't want to say aggressive because that has its own connotations, but assertive in challenging the assertions in the ad, because it really is, oh, be scared, be scared. The electric EV is the boogeyman. So yeah, but thank you.
Yeah. There's plenty of that going around, without a doubt. By the way, Keith, I've got a bunch of people who've written to me. Let me go through some of these and see what. Yeah, Bob Kaplow, right. I like this. The Stone Age came to an end, not for the lack of stones. And I think that's a good one. Yeah. And I agree with you too, Bob. I drove across the country last year, and I was in a Model 3, and I would plug it in and go in to have lunch, and I'd have to leave. I'd have to tell the waiter or waitress, the wait staff, whatever, that I'm not leaving, but you're going to see me run out this door because I got to go unplug my car so that I don't start getting changed. Yeah, the superchargers for Tesla are now so fast. You have to be like that Japanese guy that can eat 90 hot dogs in 5 minutes or whatever it is, because they're quick. Let me see what else. Simon, yeah, the biggest obstacle in my opinion is charging for people who do not own their own home, have an EV charger in a condo, apartment complex, or workplace. I agree. There's, and Simon, you probably know this, you can chime in if you want, but there are movements afoot, certainly here in San Diego, and maybe in California, I haven't looked real closely, to address the issue of apartments and all that kind of stuff, to make it easier for people to be able to charge it if you can't put a charger in your own home.
Yeah, SDG&E just got approval for their Power Your Drive 2 program, which is going to put another 2,000 chargers or nozzles in the San Diego area. And for those of you who aren't familiar, under the original Power Your Drive program, an apartment complex or workplace would pay some nominal fee like $500 for an EV charger, and SDG&E would assume all the cost of installing the charger and maintaining it for 10 years. I'm not sure if those same parameters will apply for Power Your Drive 2. Let's hope so, but it's a step in the right direction. And Southern California Edison has its own program to install chargers. But again, to me, in my opinion, the biggest drawback is for people who don't have a charge they can plug into every night. It's a bit more of a hassle to go out because you have to wait a half hour more to charge up your car once a week as opposed to a gas station for 5 minutes.
All right, we have some questions from a Tom Hersant. He's got his hand raised.
There we go.
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that there might be an issue with too many EVs in one neighborhood putting a drain on the grid. Is there something about not too many of my neighbors should have EVs?
That comes back, Tom, to the same thing I was saying earlier, that if most people are charging at night, it's not an issue at all. And I don't know the guidelines that SDG&E is required to operate by or design by in terms of designing what's called their T&D, transmission and distribution. But there is definitely margin in the size of the wires and the transformers in a neighborhood with an expectation of what amount of, the amount of power that will be required. But it depends on the charger you have. At our house, we have one charger that's 220 volts, 15 amps, and the other charger is 25 amps at 220 volts. And so that, and sometimes they do charge simultaneously, but that's not much more than our air conditioner pulls. So it's really a pretty easy trade-off. And again, we set up our charging from midnight till 6 in the morning. So that is another thing though, that I would say that SDG&E's already been looking at. In fact, they've been required to do that. One of the examples you look at is people putting a lot of solar panels on their homes in a neighborhood. That is the exact same problem in reverse. So in the middle of the day, you have a tremendous amount of power, let's say coming out, let's say every house on a block has a solar panel array, that is going to be pumping a lot of power down the transmission and distribution system as opposed to taking it. And I've already seen maps of SDG&E's layout of the city and the various lines they are upgrading to be able to handle that particular problem. And they handle that one, they're going to handle the EV issue as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Larry's got a question.
Well, I wanted to comment on some of the questions and when to charge. I was just helping someone look at their San Diego Gas electric bill. Most of us they're shifting us to time of use. So midnight to 6 a.m. But I noticed in the small print, during the day, Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 is also super off peak. Why? Because of the solar production that's in our state. So that's a good time to charge as well. And if you're worried about when either being able to handle the grid, being able to handle it, you got that excess solar, they want people to use it. So that's, and then weekends, it's from midnight till 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, because offices are closed and not as much is being pulled from the grid. And we have the solar and excess production. So just FYI, there's a lot of times to charge that there's excess capacity. HOAs and apartments, yeah, I'm actually working with an HOA now to help them move forward with how individuals can upgrade their connecting their meters and charge in their parking spot. So yes, we need to move forward with that because a lot of people live in apartments and HOAs. Code changes. I was listening to a webinar on by the state where they're reviewing how to make code changes to help apartments and HOAs bring more power lines if needed, but do it in an economical way, not just cost lots of money, but do it in a smart way. So they're starting to think how to do that. And last, I think, Mark, you just mentioned it, 30% or more people have EVs in their own home, have solar. So that's a win-win, it's a plus plus. So I hope that answers some of the questions that were just raised, but yeah, we all need to work on those issues.
Yes, that's good.
All right,
Thanks, Dave.
thank
I
you.
also noticed that Carol
Yeah,
Jindal.
Dave Crow, you got a
uh,
question?
Let me real quickly, Keith, and then I'll get to Dave. Carol Jindal said, could the lower rate of fires for EVs just be due to far fewer EVs on the road? That number I gave you was normalized. So it was fires per number of EVs on the road versus fires per number of internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. So that means you're comparing apples to apples. Okay, I just wanted to answer that question that I saw. Okay, Dave, go for it.
Yeah, not so much a question, but further information on the topic that we're covering right now, which is charging. And what I see as an evolution in the adjustment of the grid to ever increasing EV owners charging at particular times based on incentives that come from the grid operators and the major utilities like SDG&E and the rest in the state, such that you're seeing right now, additionally, a lot of both rooftop solar and industrial sized solar that's almost making a total glut of available power in the middle of the day, and not at the highest need, which has now been shifted to the 4 to 9 period, if you know the time of use periods, such that another aspect of this that will be part of the solution is more workplace charging. And we should all be pushing for that also. And that does a couple of things. That's going to make better use of that middle of the day solar power glut, which in some cases has to be curtailed. There's a treatment called curtailment, where the state operators have to push back on the solar producers to tell them to either stop contributing to the grid or the price that is paid for that energy is reduced to de-incentivize them participating in the grid. So workplace charging, middle of the day, is going to be able to take some of that surplus. Oh, a little footnote from what Larry was saying, that that middle of the day super off-peak 10 to 2, that was only for March and April. We're back to the normal time of use periods now. But my big point is that all of our concerns about the grid being overloaded, not everyone's going to buy an EV tomorrow and plug it in all at the same time. This is all going to be an evolution. And yes, much like what Mark was talking about, SDG&E is always upgrading. They're always replacing their transformers with something better. They're always analyzing the load on the grid everywhere. So nothing catastrophic bad is going to happen here. I would recommend everybody put some solar panels on your roof. If you can, in this new teleworking day that we're in now, even though I still have a 9-to-5 job, I'm only going in a couple days a week. And so those other couple of days of the week, my car's in the garage, my panel's on the roof. And just like today, even though we were a little bit overcast, I was charging my car directly from the sun for about 5 hours. So there are solutions. There are more solutions than problems in this situation. That's all I had.
The world is ever changing. I see here Thomas Basso asked about how the utilities are embracing EVs. Let me tell you, the electric utilities, they love electric vehicles because they get to put in, as Dave was just saying, more hardware, and that's how they make money. That's an investment, and they get a rate of return on that investment, so they love it. Another little news piece, I don't know if everybody saw this, but I don't remember exactly the date, but in April, at one point, California hit 95% renewable electricity, 95%. It's a new record. And you watch, and what's interesting, at that time, we were exporting fossil power to other states. Now, the reason we're doing that is that you want to keep, and now this is my background of being a geek in the power industry coming through. So anybody who wants to shut off, I would recommend right now. But what you want to do in the power industry is keep certain plants online and quote spinning, producing power at whatever their minimum is. And minimum sometimes is 50% because these things can't turn down very far. And sometimes they can. So gas plants can typically turn down to 30%, but coal-fired, which actually we don't have in the state anymore, 50%. But what the grid operator was doing is it backed gas or fossil fuel power down as far as it could. It sent that out of the state, and we here in the state, within 5%, 5.5 actually, or 5.4, we're on 100%, we're on renewable energy, which is cool. I love that. It's a wonderful thing. So renewable energy is still going in like crazy. As you probably know, the new administration is supporting the build out of renewable power, and it's coming. The world is definitely changing. Oh, Bob Caplow asked, are these slides available? Yes. You can send an email either to Keith or to Elaine, and they can get it to me, and I'll be happy to send you the entire slide deck, and the slide deck has my notes in it that I was reading from, so you'll have everything that you need. Okay, let's see what else we have in here. Keith, you have something else? I mean, I can keep answering questions if you want me to.
Well, no, I think in a time and if everyone's time is valuable. So if we could just wrap this up, if there's a last comment or someone has a hand to raise.
Oh, somebody asked if it's being recorded. You can tell them, yes, that's true.
Yes. And we get it posted
Keith,
on our
I do have
website eventually.
a footnote.
Okay, we got Tom. I saw him just raise a hand.
John?
Okay, I got two items. I forgot to mention that workplace charging is also a great advertisement for EV adoption. We know that as for a fact. That's a very visible representation of EVs in use and being adopted. So that's another plus for that. And secondly, I want to give a shout out. I should have done this at the beginning when you were talking about flower fields. We also had another event. We did our first Vista Farmers Market show of cars. In fact, that's the picture on the on Elaine's present message page in the newsletter is showing the cars we had on display. It was an overcast day, so they didn't have that many people. But I would say that if it was a sunny day at the Vista Farmers Market, we would have been totally overwhelmed. I was talking nonstop, and people were interested, definitely interested in EVs. So shout out to everybody that helped with the farmers market. That was a good showing too, and I know that we're going to be doing that periodically in the future. That's all I had.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to thank you, Mark. Excellent presentation, very informative.
You're welcome. I appreciate it.
All right, yeah, thank you, Mark. For those of you that still get magazines in the mail, Motor Trend next month is June's issue, but it comes out in May, is all about green cars. They've got a section there on value used cars, which could be interesting. They've got a section where they're comparing the Volvo SUV to the Volvo EV. And then our little one-page thing, shout out to all the conversion shops out there. And we've got, you know, a EV West, San Diego gets a shout out in there. So I think I couldn't find a digital one, so I just scanned my magazine really quick, but so I think it's gonna be a great resource for those looking to actually read and hold something. And they mention all the manufacturers that are also making EVs in the issue.
And Keith, I might also want to add that this meeting appears to have been recorded, and assuming there's no technical glitch, we'll have that up on YouTube before too long.
Correct. And that's what Bob does for us. Thank you, Bob. So with that, that was kind of the gist of our meeting tonight. I usually here before the meeting about a half hour, 45 minutes, and I will stick around till the end of the meeting for those of you that have questions or concerns or want to micro dive into something else. But thank you for coming. As always, if you've got something you're interested in, you can send it to us. info@sandiegoev.org is kind of our generic one. You know, it goes to Elaine. That's a great place. We are still working on our local EV bike manufacturer to get them. We thought we had them lined up and something happened, so we're still going to get those guys on at some point. I know at Aptera, we're definitely working on them again. So yeah, thank you for all showing up tonight. Like
And
I
I'll
said,
stick around as well.
yes, Simon, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, it's not exactly definite, but I think we are going to have the CEO of the Community Choice Aggregate in North County. It's called Clean Energy Alliance, give a presentation next month. And I've talked to her and I've asked her to tailor the presentation to show EV charging rates under SDG&E versus the community choice. So that should be an interesting discussion if that all falls into place.
That's the northern beach cities, kind of Del Mar,
It's
Encinitas.
Carlsbad, Solana Beach, and Del Mar, I believe. Yeah. It's called Clean Energy Alliance.
Okay. And if with that, unless anyone has some more chat they want to do, that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you all for showing up. Yes, Tom again, Tom Wigman.
Yeah, Keith, if this is the end of the meeting, you said you'd stick around for a few. I had a couple questions. One of them was that when I logged in, it was just the very beginning of the meeting, and there had been an earlier discussion about the Chevy Bolt. And I have one of those Chevy Bolts. I was wondering what that discussion was about. Was it about that battery recall issue?
Yeah, they were talking how someone was actually successful to get one, a California lemon law buyback. They got their
Oh.
car bought back. They said it was a long process, but once they got into the queue, then it went really quick and they got their full price, tax, title, all the fees and everything. Versus another individual was mentioning that they had their car, I think they just got it back or they're getting it back soon. They're getting actually the modification done to their car.
I had it done on Monday.
Yeah,
Takes
William.
about 4 hours. Just take it in, doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I had mine done too, but and that was several days ago, but I really haven't been able to tell any difference. It didn't seem to me like it charges up like it used to before they adjusted it downward.
You have to check your settings because it resets everything, but
Okay.
the fix is more accurate monitoring of the batteries more than anything else.
Oh, okay.
Fixtures. I don't know about the charging levels.
All right.
I wanted to ask a question. I put in the chat and Bob K gave a response, but I think he was making reference to a situation in another state. I'm just wondering, the incentives are for people to charge when the rates are low in the middle of the night. If you're in California and you're charging in the middle of the night, is there any way to know what kind of energy is being used to charge your car? Is there a way to find out, are you using stored renewable energy like solar, or are you using non-renewable energy when you charge in the middle of the night? Where's the energy coming from? Does anyone know?
Dave
Yep.
Dave Crow has an answer.
Hey, Mark, well, John, to answer your question, I'm going to direct this also to Mark because he's the smartest man in the world on this stuff. You can reach out. There is a website. It's the CAISO, CAISO.com, I think. And that is the California Independent Service Operators. And they post on that site real time at a California grid level of all the sources for power going to the grid. All the imported sources, all the natural sources, all the standard power plants, and that will give you the mix of power being and their sources being used to power our grid at any moment of the day. And it's updated every 5 minutes, I think. And all the pricing is dynamic. It's if you want to geek out like what Mark says, hit that site and set aside about 4 hours. Actually, because there's a lot of very informative graphs, such that you'll see, like in the middle of the night, midnight to 6 in the morning, you're going to see natural gas power plants, probably the biggest contributor. The biggest contributor in the renewables is wind at that time, and there are other renewables like biomass and geothermal is a little bit. But obviously solar is not there. And there's also even another graph on there that shows you, to answer your question about batteries, is that our battery capacity on the state level grid is fairly small right now. I mean, it's growing, but it's just a little bit of a surge volume, charge, discharge. It's not that much of a contributor just yet. So CAISO.com, CAISO.com. And that probably that website and that particular topic could be a presentation all in of itself.
So I'll add a little bit to that. I think that's an excellent question, John, and it's one that, if you're very concerned about the climate emergency, as I am, charging at night seems like a bad